Meanwhile back in LA, Perry and Della were waiting to hear something from San Francisco, and Perry breathed a sigh of relief when his phone rang and Paul was on the other line. He was fine, and the double murder had been solved. Now, it was Perry's job to get George Streeter freed from the charge of killing a police officer. That was going to be tough without anyone else as a witness, but he would do his best. Della was so glad to hear that Paul was all right, she fell into Perry's shoulder and just cried with relief. Paul was her closest friend next to Perry, and she just did not want to ever lose him. For now everyone was safe, and she could relax. Tomorrow was going to be Saturday, and Della felt like taking a ride. She thought about going up to the Queen Mary and talking to the chef about the cake, and to look at the cabins that their guests were going to be staying at. Perry, everything is good here. What about going to the Queen Mary and choosing out our wedding cake? We can look at the cabins and have a nice dinner, she told him. Perry smiled. That sounds good to me. I will call in the morning and make sure that the chef will be there. And if he is, we can go up there. Maybe we can spend the night too, he told her with a wink. I will call you and let you know, but pack a night bag, he told her, and with that he gave her a kiss good night and headed for his home. The next morning Perry called the Queen Mary and talked to the chef himself. He would be glad to see Perry and Della at 2 o'clock if that was convenient. It was, and so he gave Della a call. He had reserved 2 adjoining rooms for the night and got dressed into casual clothes. Della had hoped that they could go to the Queen Mary and was happy when Perry called her. Everything would work out fine, and they left for the Queen Mary at 10 that morning. It was just under an hour away, and so it was perfect for them to head out and enjoy the scenery. They could then eat their lunch and check into their cabin rooms. Then at 2 they would meet with the chef. It was going to be a good day, and Perry had brought the Mustang. The weather was perfect and there was not a cloud in the sky. When they arrived at the Queen Mary, it was 11:15, and Perry and Della walked around the pier for a while. There were several artists displaying their art, and Della found a picture of the sea and the harbor and bought it for the house. She was not sure where it was going to hang, but she found the best place in her new home. Perry smiled as he purchased the painting for her, and they headed over to the Queen Mary. Perry and Della's cabins would not be ready for another hour, and so they walked over to the restaurant. The food had always been good there, and this time was no different. They each had sandwiches with a salad and enjoyed the meal together. They would be married here on the ship in just 9 weeks, and neither one of them could wait. They finished their meal at the perfect time and walked over to the desk. They checked in with the desk, and the porter went and got their bags. They were again on the side where they could watch the sunset and enjoy the salt air out in one of the many restaurants on board the ship. Della walked into her suite and loved it once again. It was everything that she would ever want, and hoped that Perry and her would have one of the best weddings that the Queen Mary had ever hosted. Della took out her few items that she had taken for the night and freshened up. She had just put on some comfortable shoes when Perry knocked on the door. He was standing there as handsome as ever and ready to go down and see the chef. As they walked into the restaurant, they were met immediately by the chef, who brought them into the back room. He had several cake pictures in a book and had one cake ready for a wedding that was going to be taking place that afternoon. Perry and Della looked at each cake and listened intently to the chef as he explained each cake and how many people it would feed. They chose a 4-tier cake with marble cake on the bottom, chocolate on the second tier, and vanilla on the third tier. The fourth tier would be vanilla also. They chose a cream frosting with roses surrounding the entire cake. It would serve 220 people easily. As Perry and Della walked the ship, they saw the room where their wedding was going to be held. The room was now all set up for another wedding. It was beautiful and elegant, something that could have been out of the 1930s. Della wanted their song to be from the early years. It would go along with the room where they were to be married, and would fit well with their guests. As Della and Perry took their seats on the deck, they enjoyed the air and the quiet. It was a good place to relax. And both were pleased with the room where their wedding was going to be. It was not that far from many of their friends' homes, and Della and Perry had rented rooms for the other guests who lived too far away. Everything was going all right. That night there was going to be an old-fashioned dance with a 1930s theme. Della and Perry could not wait to go dancing that night. They went to a restaurant on the top deck of the ship and enjoyed the view of the Pacific Ocean. Together they enjoyed one of the nicest meals that they had together in a long time. Promptly at 9 the dancing started, and the two of them danced closely until past midnight. It was a wonderful warm evening, and they both hoped that they would have that kind of weather for their wedding. Della had listened to the music that night, and she really liked the song that was played. She had heard the song before on old movies and things. The name of the tune was Always by Irving Berlin. She wanted to know whether or not Perry would like that to be their first dance. She would talk about it in the morning, because she was very tired and ready for bed. They walked together and stood at the railing where they had first kissed and watched the stars as they danced in the sky. The night had been wonderful, and once again they had a good night together. They now had the cake selected and had seen the hall where their wedding was to take place. It was a beautiful place, and they both slept soundly that night. The next morning they enjoyed the Sunday brunch and headed back home a little after 11. As Perry and Della turned into their street, they saw that Laurie and Mike had come home. Della was glad to see that they had made it home safe and walked quickly up the walkway to the house. Perry walked with his hand linked in her arm and was surprised at how fast Della was walking. He knew that she was excited to see her sister, and they were both greeted with hugs and kisses as they walked into the house. Perry and Della laughed as they took a seat on the couch. Mike and Laurie took their customary seats on the love seat and started to tell about their honeymoon. They had gone up the coastline and had indeed made it up to San Francisco, where they had stayed for the week. They saw everything that there was to see in San Francisco, and had headed back to LA 3 days ago. Last night they had been so impressed with what they heard about the Queen Mary they had decided to spend the night there. Della let out a laugh. "You were on the Queen Mary last night?" "Yes, and Mike and I walked by where they were going to hold a wedding, and oh, what a beautiful room." "Your wedding is going to be beautiful," Laurie said with some excitement. "The ship must be bigger than we thought," Della, Perry told them with a laugh. "You see, we were on the ship last night too," Perry told them with a smile. The four of them had a good laugh about that one. How they had missed each other none of them knew. Each of them had their cars parked by the valet, so they had not seen their cars. But they had both eaten breakfast at the Sunday brunch. It was a big surprise. Mike and Laurie had bought both Perry and Della some trinkets, and Perry and Della thanked them again. Neither Laurie or Mike knew about the murder, and Della filled them in on it. Laurie looked at her sister and saw that she was still worried about the charges against George Streeter for the murder of the police officer, but she had the greatest confidence that her sister and future brother-in-law would solve the mystery. Della showed them the picture of their new home. The only thing left was the inspection, and she was sure that the inspection would go well. They had seen nothing that would indicate that there was a problem with the house. The inspection was scheduled for that Tuesday. Della and Perry were both going to go there and follow the man who did the inspection, so that if there were any questions they could be asked then. "Then it is off to our shopping. We need to find furniture for at least 6 rooms and many towels for the pool house. And the 3 bathrooms inside the home. They would need bedding, just about everything imaginable. We will have some fun doing it, I promise," Della told her sister. Oh, I can't wait. When will the house be available for you to move into it? Lori asked. It will be ready for July 1st, just 2 more weeks. I know that we need a completely new living room set and a master bedroom set for both Perry and me. We will need a kitchen table and a living room set for the pool house. And things for the kitchen that is in there also. It is a huge house with a pool house and a room for woodworking. And such right in the garage. I know that you will like it. The good thing is that it is just 2 blocks away from here. Della told Mike and Lori. That evening went by too quickly and Perry left at just a little past 10. It had been a long weekend and work would come early in the morning. Della wanted to prove along with Perry and Paul that George Streeter had not shot the officer. She thought that she would go and talk to Gretchen and Babette. They might know the truth, and now that they knew who had murdered the 2 men, they might be willing to talk to her. She would talk to Perry about it in the morning.